This here is in front of the National Museum in London. Today it's December 6, 2017. The National Museum here was opened in 1753. It's the first national public museum. So this is about the past of the United Kingdom. There is also big discussion now here in London about the future of the country, and this concerns Brexit. Brexit has a lot of challenges and problems. So there was a 51.9% majority for Brexit in the referendum 2016, but obviously there were some problems with the Cameron info campaign. For instance, the main finding of the Treasury analysis, namely that income would reduce by 10% due to Brexit, was not included in the 16 pages info brochure which the Cameron government mailed to all households in England April 11 to 13. It's almost a mystery why the Treasury analysis was published only a week later. It's also very strange actually that there was a lot of anti-EU immigration rhetoric. It was argued by Mr. Cameron and also later by Prime Minister May that EU immigration is a burden for the UK. If you look at the figures from OECD, they show that immigration amounts to a net contribution to the British budget. So it's not really a burden, and it's very difficult to understand the anti-immigration rhetoric, particularly of Mr. Cameron, which made immigration part of the campaign then of the referendum. In the book An Accidental Brexit, published by Palgrave Macmillan, it is shown that a major reason to explain then the anti-EU immigration rhetoric is the fact that they were looking for a scapegoat, that they had to reduce the budget deficit, or we can say in this case the government transfers to local authorities. There's about 3.5% of GDP. If you think that the peak of the deficit GDP ratio was about 10%, then of course we understand the Cameron budget policy led to an under-provision of local public services, and then many people in Birmingham, in London and elsewhere in the country, they would conclude, oh, this is all because of the immigrants, while in reality it was due to the budget policy of Mr. Cameron himself. So at the moment we are at a critical juncture. The negotiations in Brussels have not been very successful so far. It's unclear whether there will be an exit treaty, and without an exit treaty there cannot be the second treaty, namely concerning future British access to the EU single market. There are some important questions which also are highlighted in the book. Some of it are easy to understand, I think. Taking into account that EU exports of the UK is 12% of GDP, it's absolutely clear that future access to the EU single market is quite important. It is impossible, for instance, to simply find a kind of a counterweight by increasing transatlantic trade with the United States, even if, as one may assume, there is a free trade agreement between the United Kingdom and the US. That part of trade is just 2.5% of the British GDP. It is also important to understand that there is a considerable income loss or welfare loss, which we at the European Institute for International Economic Relations figure is something like 16%. So the accumulated future income loss expressed as a present value, and then you put it relative to the 2016 income, that's 16%, which is a big amount for an average or median income family, and even worse for the poorer strata of society. We understand, of course, there is also some criticism vis-à-vis the European Union that is easy to understand, and for instance there's overregulation in parts of the economy, particularly in the real economy, not so much in financial markets and banking. Here I'm worried that Brexit will lead to a decline of output growth in the UK, and this in turn will encourage then the government to adopt a new wave of banking deregulation. If we have banking deregulation in the UK and in the US, this will bring in a new wave of banking deregulation, of excessive deregulation in the European Union, and then we are heading towards the next banking crisis. So this could be avoided if we would have some joint EU 27 UK banking regulation in the future, but it is very unclear whether there will be negotiations that could lead to this type of result. I would hope that the cooperation between universities in any case will continue. And finally, of course, the European Union itself has to reform. Here it is important that the the political activities in Brussels become more visible so that the voters at European elections understand what is the role of the European Union. Many voters say, according to research of the Forschungsgruppe Wahlen, which is an expert group looking into voting behavior in Germany, they say the Commission's work is too complex, cannot be understood by the voters, who then have a tendency to vote for small radical parties. And the implication then is that European elections nurture political radicalism and populist parties, basically anti-EU parties, which then destroy the European Union from within. This would be very doubtful. I think there's no reason to be pessimistic. One should, on the other hand, carefully look at the analysis of various experts groups. I close by saying that the recent analysis by the Dutch Rabobank suggests that a no-deal Brexit would bring an output decline of 18% for the UK. It would bring about recession for 1 or 2 years, and for the EU, the output decline would be about 1.5 or 2%. So these are actually big numbers, and we should probably rethink the whole Brexit project. There should be reforms, there should be broader discussions, and one can only warn to take the big historical step towards Brexit without considering the option of having a second referendum where the population is much better informed and where the procedural rules are better observed than in the referendum 2016.